Hey, this is Brendan Gersall, and you are listening to the Speaking of podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with another one of my heroes. I'm trying to do that a little bit more lately, and you're going to see that happen from time to time where I sit down with somebody who has just meant the world to me, who's shaped me and influenced me, and God has used mightily in my life. And today I sit down with a man, one of my heroes, named John Symonds. He has been many things to me. In recent years, he's been a colleague and a mentor and a friend, I would even say. But my whole life, he's been a pastor. He's been a leading figure in the church. He's been a professor to me. He taught me how to preach. He's taught me so many things. He was literally my Bible college professor on a number of levels. And I'm just thrilled to be able to sit down with one of my heroes. I could talk to him all day. I expect you're going to enjoy this as well. This is my conversation with Pastor John Symonds. So Pastor John Symonds, I've been wanting to sit down with some of my heroes, and you, sir, fit that bill. I was thinking, how do I tell people who you are to me? And you've been a pastor to me. You have, specifically at Kingswood, you were the campus I was. Yeah. You were while I was at school, training to be a pastor. But you weren't just my pastor then. You were my professor as well. You taught me preaching, which we'll talk about some, I think, later on, hopefully. I was thinking you probably hold the record for person I've heard preach live most in my life. Really? I would think. I think so, or at least that I can remember. You know what I mean? Like I might have heard Mel Norton growing up at Olivet in Fredericton. Might have heard him more times, but the soundtrack of preaching in my childhood and adolescence and then young adulthood, Beulah, I've probably heard you dozens of times, and then, would have heard probably a few hundred times over 3 or 4 years at Kingswood.
Right. I would preach twice a week there.
Yeah, often. Totally. Yeah. So you're, what's that?
A couple of
weeks. Yeah. At chapel. Yeah. So, you've been a preacher to me and a teacher to me. You've taught me expository preaching and homiletics. Yeah. I actually remember some of that, so that's good. And then pastoral ministry too, like basic pastoral ministry class. Yeah. In fact, I was thinking back to remembering an infamous, that covers a lot of the practical, like, communion and pastoral care and visitation.
Weddings and funerals.
Yeah, sort of the crash course of pastoral ministry and everything you're going to need to know except for finances, which for some reason we send our clergy out fully unequipped to deal with the fact that you're running a business at some level, but that comes later. But
I was fully unequipped to teach that whole end of it, really.
Well, but what you did, though, is you took us to the field. I remember a certain visit to a funeral home.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, man, I'll never forget going to the funeral home, getting the tour, going back to see the...
Do you want to remember about that? There was a kid or two in that class who had never been in a funeral home, who had never been to a funeral, was really freaked out, and they took us to the casket room.
Yeah, well, no, I think the part that I remember was the funeral director took us back to the morgue, like not the morgue, but where they prepare the bodies.
Oh, okay.
And everyone was just white as a ghost back there, and he was talking about how comfortable he was with it, and like how he'd done family members and stuff, and we were all just like,
he was enjoying talking about.
Oh, he loved it, and we were all just like, just deer in headlights. But it's a real treat to be able to sit down with you. I have a bit of a personal goal, and that is to stretch this beyond 30 minutes.
Okay.
So you are the notorious, if you can't say something short, don't say it, which I think you're right about that, but I'm going to try to pull you.
You know what that whole 30-minute thing came from? Back in the day, my years in Yarmouth, it was a good discipline for me to try to put my sermon on a 30-minute cassette tape. Remember cassette tapes?
Yeah.
With the closing song.
Wow.
If we had one, on a 30-minute cassette.
So you had about 24 minutes.
That was a good
preach.
discipline. I found that was just a good discipline.
So
for me.
that's really where you learned to.
That's how I kind of learned to.
Wow.
And now I almost end up at 25 to 27 max.
Yeah.
Without hardly, it's become part of what I do. It seems.
Yeah.
It's
funny, you just learn how to prepare a certain way.
Yeah.
For better or worse, for my people, I sort of default at about 44 or 46 minutes. Like
Yeah.
it just, and then if it's long, it goes a little longer than that. If it's short, it's 38, which would be long for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so just for people who don't know your story, you have been in ministry for decades now. When did you start in like pastoral ministry?
I was a school teacher, public schools in Fredericton till 79.
Okay.
And left teaching in June of 79, went off to Asbury Theological Seminary in Kentucky, graduated in 82. So I'm in my 39th year since 82.
So just about my lifetime.
Just about.
You've been doing this.
The fall of 82, I came to Corbett Avenue in Fredericton.
Yeah, I would love to, because I've never asked you. I've heard you talk about, you were a school teacher.
Yeah.
What went into that transition? Like, how did you go from, teaching classes in Fredericton in the public school system to I'm going to give my whole life to building the church and reaching the lost?
I was a miserable school teacher. I don't mean I was a poor school teacher. I mean I was miserable teaching.
Okay.
I defaulted into teaching in 67. I'm finished university, and in those days the school superintendents would come to the college trying to hire students who were just graduating. The jobs were that plentiful.
Really?
And I thought, I need to do something. I'll
Here's a
try
job.
teaching. But
Wow.
I never happy doing it. I mean,
Wow.
my favorite times were noon hour and recess and summer vacations,
Right.
weekends, and it just stressed me out. I'd get up in the morning, couldn't eat breakfast. I was not interested in my lunch, make up for it at night.
Yeah.
And I lived like that for 12 years. But years 7, 8, and 9, I see it all clearly now. God was impressing on me. I just had the greatest hunger to be in vocational ministry.
Right.
And convince myself it was too late.
Right. So you would have been.
I'm in my mid-30s.
Right.
I have a house and a mortgage and a wife and 2 children.
Wow.
And it's too late. I can't go back. And I had myself convinced of that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the primary things that holds us back from taking steps of faith like that is all these reasons why I'm kind of tied to this lifestyle now.
Yeah. I couldn't see God in it. I thought I had to work this out and this out and this out, and it just came to the place where I found myself in a service at Beulah Camp on a Saturday morning, the educational service.
Okay.
And the guy that's chairing the service says, "Turn around and tell someone what God's doing in your life." And I'm thinking, not much.
Wow.
And I turned around, and there was my pastor, Norman Trafton.
Okay.
And I found myself saying to him, "This is the year. I am done with teaching school. I'm going off and prepare for ministry."
Wow.
And his response to that was so positive and affirming. And that was 78.
Wow. And so you
Taught
went
for 1 more year,
Okay.
and then went off to Asbury in 79.
So it seems like, because I think for people who aren't in ministry, like which actually most of the people who be listening to this wouldn't be, I'd love to dive into the process of that, like how God led you into something new. Did it start? It seems like it started with discontentment.
Yes, it did.
It started with just like this is just not.
Yeah. It started with that, just a feeling, and coupled with that, coupling with the disenchantment and the disappointment and unfulfilling teaching school was the yearning.
Right.
I mean, I would pick up catalogs from a Bible college or a seminary.
Oh, wow.
And browse through it.
Wow.
And dream and look at the courses and even tell Willow Ann, my wife, tell her that how I wish I could do this, but of course I can't. She was pushing me constantly.
Wow. Well, that's a real.
Give it up. Just do it. We'll find a way. God will show the way. He'll open the door. He'll provide but I couldn't seem. Yeah, it was a July Sunday that I made that in 78 when I finally said, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the move.
You had to do that first, though.
You know, that's an interesting thing that you just say there. I was waiting for God to do the neon lights in the sky or an audible voice.
Provide a scholarship.
But I had to take a faith step in order for God to begin to open the door. I think that's true for anybody.
Yeah.
In every circumstance, I'm waiting for God to do it all.
Yeah.
You know, to show me. But when I took that faith step, declaring to Pastor Trafton that day, then God began to open doors in amazing ways.
And you wonder how many, God's so patient, but it's not coincidental that he was behind you, you know, like that you turned and you saw him, and God, you wonder how often, I've thought about this in my own life, like, you know, you wonder how many times the Lord has been working to try to make you move, you know, but he's waiting on, it's funny, we get waiting on God and he's often waiting on us, you know, and I've been thinking about that even for this, like 2020 and the crazy time that it's been for all of us, but especially like just the church, and asking the questions about, you know, when are we going to move forward in this? And I've had a big sense of a lot of it is just waiting on the Lord to do something, but I don't know if God moves before we move a lot of the time, and that, you know, we're supposed to wait on God. You know, it says in Ephesians 6, you know, after having done all, stand firm, you know, like that there is like a component of our doing, and then we rest in the fact that God's going to do what we can't do for ourselves. But it's like I think sometimes maybe we want God to do for us what we can do for ourselves, maybe. Like,
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know where I read it first. Sometimes you read things and you forget where you read them. You think you thought of it.
Right.
God, not even God can steer a parked car.
Wow. Yeah.
And so way back then I felt it needed me to begin to take a faith step and start to move, and then God began to steer me in amazing ways. Way back as early as in August of, you know, then I began to apply. What will I do? The Bible school thing? Will I go to seminary? But as I began to move, God began to open the doors and show me clearly what and where and how, and just all of the rest.
Like a momentum starts happening.
Yeah, and things, you know, a little thing, not a little thing, just then. Owned a house. Housing market was not moving in that year. Put the house on the market and sold it in 5 days to a neighbor.
Wow.
Just an amazing sequence of things that, you know, you could say one thing might be a coincidence, but not 10 things.
Yeah.
God was orchestrating as I was being obedient and beginning to move forward.
Yeah. And you guys had 2 little kids at the time? Not
real little. Let me see. 78. Brock would have been 7 and Nikki 6.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess
little kids.
I guess they're there.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So
it was an adventure for the whole family.
Yeah.
They were so pumped, so excited.
Oh man.
It was an awesome time.
And you would have, you know, it's funny. I talked to Dr. H.C. Wilson about this because I wanted to get his story as well. And it's like, you know, again back to the patience of God and the will of God. You know, if you didn't answer that call, you know, I'm sure there would have been versions, a whole different timeline of your life, and God's grace would have still expressed itself, and God would have been kind to you no matter what, you know. And I sometimes think we overthink the will of God, but there's nothing like, though, answering a clear, specific invitation from God for the way that sort of just unlocks us, you know. And like there's like I can't envision you doing anything else. Like that's, you know, that's the beauty of it, is sort of getting on that right frequency, I think, with the Lord. But so you went to seminary, and then out of that, did you go straight to Yarmouth, Nova Scotia?
No, I came back to Willow Ann's home church, which would be Corvette Avenue Church in Fredericton.
Okay.
As an assistant to Milton Bagley for 1 year.
I didn't know she's from Corbett. Is that where all like the Mitchells went?
Years before that, the Mitchell family moved when Corbett was a plant.
Okay.
And from Fredericton first. So her family was well established there and in leadership when we married back in '68. So that was her home church.
And people, the viewers at home don't know or probably don't care, but I'm related to Willow Ann, right?
Yes.
My grandmother
is
her aunt. Yeah. So big giant family.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure.
So you went to Corbett, and that was how long you were there?
Just 1 year.
1 year, and then you went to Yarmouth.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
so, and when you went to Yarmouth, what size was that church? As far as people.
I think they averaged that the year before I went there. I averaged 62.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was established church.
Yeah, it was a solid church. The thing that was exciting to me about going there is that the vice chair of the board at that time says, "Would you come down here and help us? If you give us leadership, we'll follow you."
Wow.
I mean,
that's all you need,
not
right?
Not every little church would say a thing like that.
And did they?
And they did.
Wow. Well, I think the evidence is there, and I want to talk about that. Before I move into that, because I want to talk about, because it's such a unique story of what God did through you at Yarmouth. It's really just an outlier. It's just such a unique thing. But I wanted, you referenced Pastor Trafton and Cochran, and who were the people that influenced you the most? Through those years, even you'd even look back and say those were shaping voices in my life that got me here. Who were they? And then I guess the follow up would be why. Like, what was it about their life or their ministry or something they said that did that?
Well, initially it'd be my father.
Yeah.
My dad was a longtime pastor here in the Maritimes. He went into the ministry in his 30s.
Oh, really?
And pastored 40 years until he was 70. But
was he a teacher before?
No, my dad was a fisherman and a trucker, and
okay,
who God miraculously healed.
Oh,
when he was a young man, dramatically healed him in a moment of time.
From what?
He broke his back picking up huge rocks, building a dock down in southwest Nova Scotia, Port Maitland area. Broke his back and was 5 years an invalid, and couldn't do a thing. And a dramatic healing service. That's a story in itself.
I want to hear it.
Well,
can you tell it?
It's an amazing story. 5 years in, one of the men in the church said, Gordon, that was my dad's name, I think we ought to have a healing service. And 5 or 6 of them gathered at my dad's home and laid hands on him and prayed for him. And my dad had been 5 years not being able to bend from the waist to pick anything up.
Oh, wow.
And they were about to put him in a metal kind of a straight jacket thing to keep him erect and firm, and he'd never do physical work again. And 3 little kids. And they came, a couple of pastors, a visiting evangelist in the church, and 2 or 3 lay people in the church, men, laid hands on him and prayed for him, and Dad went to bed that night. Get up the next day, and was his habit, he went down to the yard, to the bottom of the driveway to pick up a bag of feed, which my dad always kept a few animals.
Yeah.
And went down there, and after years of not being able to pick up that bag, he would nudge it over onto a wheelbarrow and then straighten the wheelbarrow, and all the time went down, bent over, and picked up the bag of feed and was carrying it.
Wow.
My mother comes out, and she says, Gordon, what are you doing? And he says, I think I've been healed.
Wow.
Went in the house, and she stripped off his shirt. For years, she had been rubbing Absorbine Jr. on his back. And one side of his back, it was just pliable. You could push it right in.
Yeah.
Both sides were hard as a rock. She'd been doing that daily for years.
Wow.
So in a moment of time, then my dad gets invited to go around to the various churches in southwest Nova Scotia and tell his healing story.
Yeah.
And miraculous story, and God tremendously used that. Well, then he gets invited back to speak a second time, and my father thinks, can't tell the same story, have to prepare a sermon.
That was
the beginning. And then at a little church way down in Woods Harbor, Nova Scotia, where Jason Parker is today, says, would you come down and be our pastor? And he moved down.
Wow. I did not. I knew nothing of that.
Oh, really?
No.
Everybody should hear that story.
Yeah.
I have my dad's voice on a cassette tape telling that story.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a real treasure.
Yeah. I play it for my grandkids. I want them to know what happened to their grandfather.
Don't you think we have to be intentional about, especially like, I don't know, when it comes to like we so easily forget when God has done something spectacular.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, maybe it's the enemy, maybe it's sin in us, but it just seems to fall out of our memory so fast.
Well, I feel bad that, I know I've known you all those years. You've
Yeah.
never heard my dad's story.
I've never heard it.
Well, I feel that's on me, that there should be a way for me to tell that more often than I do. During my Yarmouth years, I would have my dad down
Right.
when he'd come down to visit. I always got him up to tell his story. In the later years, he didn't feel he had the emotional strength to tell it,
Yeah.
so we'd do it like this interview was.
Yeah.
I'd bring him to the platform, we'd sit in chairs,
Yeah.
and I'd ask him questions and lead him through it.
Yeah.
And people would rejoice, and then we'd anoint people, call people,
Yeah.
if you want to be prayed for healing.
I'd love to ask you about like prayer for healing, because, that's such an unusual thing, just again, over the last maybe 5 to 7 years, I've been on a journey trying to, explore that, hear these stories, do some maybe swim in some different streams, of the church, maybe people who have a little more experience or, I don't know, appetite even for it. And I didn't really grow up where that was something to be, experienced regularly, like that God's a God of miracles. It was just such a, not just supernatural, but super rare, a thing to hear a story like that.
Yeah.
I don't know that it needs to be, though, like that. I wonder, you read Jesus say, these signs will accompany you. You will heal the sick.
Yeah.
You will cast out demons. You'll cleanse lepers. You'll raise the dead. Like, either he didn't know what he's talking about, or we're missing something. Because like that, honestly, I don't know if
Is it if you ask not, you have not? Maybe we're just not
diligent enough.
Maybe not.
I don't know. I tell you what, though, I hear a story like that, and I'm like, we're missing something.
Yeah.
Like that. There's an appetite inside of me that
I think you're right.
that rises up. Even back to the conversation of being discontent. I'm discontent with this level of power, maybe. And I'm definitely not one of these people. I mean, I read my Bible. Paul died of something. Peter died of something. Like, I don't think that God's going to heal everybody. I don't. I push. There's a part of me that thinks it's unhelpful to kind of do blanket statement, hey, if we really had faith, or, there's no reason why we couldn't go into hospitals and empty them out. Like, I don't think that's supposed to be the case, but I also don't think that the church is supposed to settle into this zone of, we're supposed to win people only with apologetics or a holy example. I actually think that one of the primary evangelistic tools was supposed to be signs and wonders that point back, like the fact that your father, that one incredible miracle, it became an on-ramp to Christ for people all along the South Shore. And then now, how many years past, when did that happen? I mean, we're now talking about the same thing, stirring up faith. I think we were missing.
Long before I was born, 1936.
So
my dad was healed, and henceforth, all through the years, even when he was pastoring, he always did physical work. He had a big garden, hunted in the woods, and raised rabbit hounds. He's always a physical labor kind of guy.
Was he a large stature? Like, was he a big guy?
He was maybe not quite as tall as I am, but he was over 6 feet.
Yeah,
a big man, hardy, strong.
There's something, God won't let me leave it, and I will not get into some sort of cessationist zone. Like, I think, I wonder if, you'd be a student of the church, you'd be someone who, has lived in it, served in it, studied it. You see, on the one hand, you'll see people that they've not experienced the miraculous, so they just settle into this, well, clearly there's miracles in the book of Acts, but that's, the cessationists, right? That this stuff that was just for them to get the Bible and get the church going, and now really we're on our own. It's God, it's us and the Holy Bible, and, name of the game, stay faithful. And then you have, so a lack of miracles produces that, doubt. or I've seen a lack of miracles has produced some pretty crazy sort of, I think, human fabrications of, calling something supernatural that really isn't, and I just wonder, though, like, again, the enemy's just trying to distort and pervert and get us off of what it is God really has for us. And I hope that before I am done, I hope that my kids' generation, even, like, that's a little more, the supernatural is a little more natural for them. I hope that's the case. I wonder, even on the other side of whatever 2020 is and whatever God's doing in the church and whatever's happening on the earth, I think there's substantial things moving toward, I think, hopefully, I'm believing for a big move of God. And I think part of that will be, the kingdom really being expressed in powerful ways, being manifested in front of people.
Yeah.
And, I hope that my kids, that it's not as strange of a thing, to lay hands on someone and expect them to be healed.
Yeah.
For me, it was such a, it's just a strange thing that
my grandchildren aren't seeing enough of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There must be a more sensible center over there between the radical extremes of that whole issue. Yeah,
and I just think but I mean, conversations like this keep coming up, and I feel like the Lord won't let me let it go or drift into some sort of apathetic, well, it'd be cool if it happened. I think we're actually supposed to contend that it happens.
Yes.
So thanks for sharing that, because
you've kind of motivated me to dig that cassette tape out.
Yeah.
And play it for my grandkids.
You should also record it on digital.
I need to do that.
Make a copy, and that's
you'd enjoy listening.
That's what I would love to hear it. Yeah. Like, I really would.
It's my dad and mom sitting in the living room, and Dad telling the story, and Mother interjecting comments, and Gordon, this happened, and remember this, and getting emotional while they're telling it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the part where my mother tells about standing in the window and looking out and seeing my father walk up the yard with a bag of feed, something she hasn't seen in 5 years, over his shoulder. Right. And he went down and did that without thinking. You don't do that after 5 years of being unable to hardly put your own shoes on.
Yeah. Something shifted in his thinking even. Yeah.
Well, the miracle in more than just the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it's such an incredible thing. One of the things we're trying to do at King's Church in our leadership, like Pastor Dan Lamus, one of the things we've tasked him with is like being a sort of a scribe, where when you hear of something awesome that God did, write it down and record it and put it somewhere, because we just are going to forget.
What a great idea.
And so we're trying to make that a practice. And I think somewhere in all this, there's a couple things that I feel like the Lord's showing me. One is, like, we need to take note when He does things, and then we have to talk about it, like with testimony. I think one of the reasons the church is maybe lacks power is because we just aren't diligent with testimony, and we don't speak about what God has done enough, because that creates faith, and then faith creates the avenue that God can move through in power.
Isn't that interesting you say that? You see, the church of my youth I grew up in, we had services that were dedicated to, they were testimony meetings.
Yep.
The Tuesday night or Wednesday night prayer meeting.
Yep.
Half of that service was people giving testimony, giving witness of what God is doing, has done, is doing currently in my life. And then that service sort of disappeared. And then in the days of the Sunday evening, we'd occasionally place a testimony or two in the service. And
I had to last Sunday. We're doing live services now, and the guy who preached was sick overnight, so I got the call kind of first thing Sunday morning. I had nothing prepared, and so I did a testimony. I did a testimony time, at our Valley location, just in person, just good old fashioned. I talked about that. Like I remember.
You gave your testimony?
No, I passed the mic around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then like, I wonder if there was a season there where maybe the seeker sensitive movement, or and I'd be the first to admit, like I think there's real wisdom in curating, our worship services and for lack of a better word, trying to control content at some level, like that. We're gonna sing these songs, we're gonna do this scripture, we're gonna do this sermon. But I wonder if we haven't over cultivated to the point where I'll be the first to admit I don't love just passing around the microphone because I don't know what what you're going to get, So in the past, our testimonies have been pre-recorded, which is powerful. But I wonder if we aren't in the habit of letting people tell their story, and that's one of the things we're hoping, we're, as at the time of this recording, we're launching home churches. We've got over 800 people that have signed up to be part of that. So
wonderful.
We're very excited about that. But I do hope that some of this stuff we're talking about, the testimony, building one another's faith through story, and actually praying for healing, some of that can be fleshed out in that context. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm hoping for that. So your dad was one of your heroes.
Yes.
We didn't get very far on that. Who else though? Any other, like whether one of the things you taught me, I do remember this as well in college, is you can have mentors that you don't know. You can read their books.
Yeah.
And who's influenced you the most over the years?
Books. Charles Swindoll.
Yeah.
Always loved his books. He's the great illustrator.
Yeah.
Right. He taught me, I believe, to illustrate well. When you're preaching, he loved his books, loved his stuff, and especially he's the master of the storyteller. I think he was.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Bill Hybels was a strong influence on me. I went to the Hybels things maybe before anybody in the district did. I was going in the early 90s. And then you had to go, if you wanted to go. I went to Chicago a couple of times, but then when the simulcast started, I would go to Boston.
Yeah.
And there might be 2 or 3 from this district. This is long before the Leadership Summit ever came here. But his stuff, his passion for lost people just stirred me deeply. John Maxwell.
Yeah.
Those are 3 men that I never met.
Yeah.
Swindoll, Hybels, and Maxwell.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law, Doug McCollum.
Okay.
When I was a young man, he pushed me hard, and I resisted this too. Let's meet once a week and pray together.
Wow.
I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But Doug was just a good man and nudged me in that direction. My brother Conard.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
My brother Conard, when I was wrestling with the whole thing, I would go on in the mid-'70s when I was wrestling with the discontent with teaching and the wanting to do ministry. And I said, I can't leave the teaching profession and go off to seminary. I mean, I'm 35, and in the time I graduate, in 3 years I'll be 38. And he said, well, how old will you be in 3 years if you don't do it?
That sounds exactly like
that's my brother Conard.
Yeah, Conard was like an uncle to me. Him and his wife Debbie would play rook with my parents pretty much every Sunday night. I think, I don't know, it was at least once a week, and we loved having him around. He just treated us like we were his own.
I miss Conard.
Me too, very much. I'm picking up a theme though in your life, and that is kind of like getting over that resistance inside of us, whether it's taking the risk, and making a career change, in spite of all the reasons why not to do it. You find reasons to do it that outweigh it. And I one of the things I've always been really challenged by you, you talk about Doug McCollum, let's go pray together. Like, I don't want to do that, but you did it.
Yeah.
And I think about you as an evangelist, someone who just had really lived in your ministry. You didn't just preach sermons on Sunday. You did like at least once a week, I think, if I remember. You'd go door to door.
Not door to door, cold turkey. Never.
Okay.
No, but I would.
Not full Mormon.
No. I always knew, almost always, I knew who was on the other side of the door. But our strategy from 83 on in Yarmouth was to attract them and chase them.
Yeah.
And we literally did that.
So if you got
Anyone
contact.
Right. Anyone who visited on Sunday, we were at their door, which was all right to do.
Yeah.
In that culture, in that day, maybe it still would be in Yarmouth, to knock on a door, unexpected, and have people say, yeah, come on
in.
Glad to see you.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the city, maybe not in this city.
Yeah.
But we did that. Anyone who visited Sunday, we were at their door.
And
Tuesday night.
It was you.
Me, and there were nights, it was me and one person. I always had somebody with me. Rarely did I ever go alone.
Yeah.
Took somebody with me. If there were 6 that showed up, with 3 teams of 2.
Yeah.
If there were 5, there were 2 teams of 2 and me alone.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's doesn't sound like a terrific strategy for church growth, but we literally, most of the people, I would say, in the 80s and 90s who came to faith in Jesus Christ prayed to receive Christ in their home Tuesday night and let it be known on Sunday.
That's wow.
Pulpit evangelism was a weakness of mine, I thought then, and maybe it's almost like the Father didn't bless my casting the net on the weekend services so much, because he wanted me out there and wanted us, and that was the strategy we used all the way up through the years, the 80s and 90s.
I think it's a better model, like as far as it's a more that's gotta impact someone deeper. That this happened in my home where I live. God came knocking at my door, quite literally.
Yeah.
I've seen hundreds of people make commitments at a service.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of things happening at a service that it might just be their emotions. It might just be a moment, and then you never see them again.
Yeah.
It's so.
We would say to them, like on a Tuesday night, now Sunday morning, at the end of the service, we'll call for people that would like to, and we would invite them to come to the front in that day, in that culture.
Wow.
And I would say, now Bob and Sue made a commitment of their lives to Jesus Christ. This is after they had come and knelt. They made their commitment to Jesus Christ in their home Tuesday night, and they're here today to declare their faith in Jesus Christ. And we're going to pray together now, and then I want you to come up and welcome them into the family of God. Wonderful way to conclude a service, and those were,
Do you think, I hear that, and it's like, I sometimes wonder if some of this kingdom stuff, following Jesus stuff, for lack of a better word, is just quite simple, and we might stall trying to be too cute with it, whether it's like a service or an invitation. Like, there's something really pure about just showing up at someone's house saying, I want to tell you about Jesus.
Yeah.
I want to tell you the gospel. Here's what it is. God, there is a God, and he's created us, and you lay it out there, and you say, there's sin, that's a problem. And Jesus died for your sins so that we could be reconciled to God. I remember in college, one of your evangelistic things is you would walk people through the bridge, right?
Yeah.
Like the kind of the 2 chasms, and there's a little man here and a little man there, and you'd put the cross as the bridge, and it's a great little tool.
It is.
And
we used that. Taught it, used it. We draw it for people on the corner of their coffee table, on a piece of a newspaper, on the kids' homework.
Yeah.
And but our approach too is very relational.
Yeah.
I remember John Maxwell, strong influence on me. He would say, within 20 minutes of being in the home, you ought to be talking about Jesus. We weren't nearly that high sell. We were much more relational.
Yeah.
I was in Yarmouth, rural Yarmouth County, out in the county and visiting. We went back to some homes over months, 4 or 5 times before the night we led them to Christ.
Right.
Rarely did we ever go in one night.
Yeah, and just go right for the jugular kind of thing. Yeah, but to my point though, I wonder though if, in comparison to how a lot of us would employ our evangelistic strategy, if we even have one now, like on a personal level, most of us probably try to get too cute with it in that, like, I'm going to be relational to you're going to be relational to death, basically, where it's like, well, I'm going to just be in their life. I'm going to shine a light.
Yeah.
And, if it ever comes up, hopefully I'll get that chance. And it's like, I wonder if, again, at the end of the day, back to the theme, I think here is like, at a certain point, you just got to do it. You just got to sit down and say, look, man, I've come here 4 times. I'm not here just because I want to hang out.
Yeah.
I'm here because God's coming after you. And like, just sort of pulling the Band-Aid and doing it. And, you talking about drawing on the bridge, where would you put the pen in their hand?
Yeah.
Say, where would you draw yourself right now and why?
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like you said, the word relational, like, I just wonder if really, like, Christianity at the end of the day is quite simple. It's about devotion. It's about relationship with God and relationship with others. And the moment we start to try to get too cute with stuff, we sort of start robbing it of its power, even. Like for preaching. Let's talk preaching for a second. It's like where Paul said, I didn't come to you with eloquent arguments and wise words, so because that would rob the gospel of its power. He's like saying the gospel is actually power, and it's powerful in its simplicity.
Yeah.
It's just raw. And I just wonder if, I've been thinking that in my own life, times where I've used some tactic or some like long relational play with somebody on my basketball team or something that really, if I was just being honest, God would say, nudge the guy, and tell him about me. I just wonder about that, the role of simplicity and just simple obedience, even.
I fought that through the years. It's so easy to be relational, for me at least, and so difficult to make the transition from basketball and weather and sports and all of that to
big.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's to get to it, and it is so simple, but it's a real discipline. Always was a discipline for me, not easy.
Yeah.
But I really need to talk to you about something tonight. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And I often use the question you've heard 1,000 times. If you were to die today, do you know for sure that you'd go to be with the Lord, that you'd go to heaven?
Yeah.
And depending on the answer, the bridge is so easy to draw out of that. But
see, I love that.
The simplicity of it, but everything else was easy to get to that. I talked myself out of that.
Right.
A lot of times, next week.
I feel like that's what we do, and it's like if at some point this just the simple reality of, in whatever it is, whether it's evangelism, whether it's sensing a call to ministry, praying for healing, like at some point there just comes this moment where you're gonna either do it or not.
Yeah.
You're gonna either simply obey, and I think, man, we overcomplicate things because of fear.
That's good.
I was thinking about that with. There's a big part of me when I hear the bridge. I hear the gospel explained as the bridge, and like a question like, do you know what's going to happen when you die? There's a big part of me because I've read a lot of books about the gospel. I've done deep dive study on it. There's a big part of me, and it's based on a half truth that says, oh, that's way, way too simple to talk about, like the gospel of Jesus, the announcement that God has reclaimed his kingship and restored Israel. And like, you start bringing in all these layers to the gospel, which are true and beautiful.
Yeah.
But I wonder if sometimes, the enemy or even our own wickedness will use our own understanding to cause us some type of failure to just do it. Like failure to launch. Yeah. And just the simple, I think you said the word discipline. Like, disciplines are simple. It's quite simple. If you eat junk food and don't exercise, you're going to be fat. It's very simple. But if you exercise and eat half decent, you're going to be in decent shape.
But it's a discipline.
It's a discipline. And man, it's been one of the things that this season God's been highlighting to me. It's just the simple obedience, simple disciplines. It's funny, the older I get, the more wisdom I see in what I was given. Read your Bible, pray every day. Yeah. It's like, it can't be that simple. Well, it is. It is that simple. It's much more complex, I'm sure, as well. But And that's the thing. I think that's the beauty of how God works. You know, like the most powerful things are highly complex, given to us in a very simple form. Like you take an iPhone, right? It's like if I oh, you see my screensaver? Here, I'll show just a sec. I'll clear the. I'll show the people at home here.
Oh,
he's peeing.
He's watering the flowers.
He's watering the flowers. It's my son. In the beautiful background, and he's peeing.
Did he know his dad was
taking
his picture?
He had no idea.
There will come a day he won't like that picture.
No,
much,
not so much. And then he'll like it again later on. Like, that's a great picture.
Then he'll
Dad.
be showing it.
Yeah, but you take an iPhone, and you get these icons, right? And it's like, you know, the beauty of we've been given this tool that's got a lot of capability, but quite simply, I don't need to understand how the email works. I just got to press the button, the mail button, and it does what it's supposed to do. And I wonder if Christianity and the disciplines, so to speak, are even like, I don't need to understand all of how prayer works. I just know it's a good thing. I need to pray, or I need to share my faith and those things. Like, bringing this down to a simple, will you or won't you? Are you going to obey? Or are you not going to? You know, I think that's a huge. But how do you? I guess the question with disciplines, I'd ask you this, because you know, I'm back to our theme of you seem to be able to stay faithful in ministry for decades. You know, before we even started the podcast, you were saying, you know, I'm as long as I'm able, I'm going to answer the call. You know, if God calls me to come serve, and you know it's clearly Him, and there's no reason I shouldn't, then I'm going to do it. Yeah. You know, how do you stay motivated? I think is my question on the reason we don't go through with something and following God. The reason we lack discipline is we lack the ability to just continue to do. So how did you go door to door for decades, or you know, how did you make those purposeful evangelistic connections? Like so many people just give themselves excuses. I do, and I get out of the habit. How do you keep, you know, the habit of obeying God in the ways you know how? I'm not saying you never disobey. I'm sure, like everybody else, but there does seem to be a lifestyle of I'm just going to stay at it. Where does that? What's the secret to simple obedience over the long haul?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just, when it comes to ministry, when it comes to obedience, as simple as saying, I'm going to say yes to whatever the opportunity is. For example, if you ask me to come and speak at this the marriage thing in October, well, the answer is yes. Yeah, I don't need to pray about that. Yeah, I'll say yes and then pray about it. Right. And so that's been my attitude. There are certain things I know I need to do. I mean, why would anybody pray about whether I should or should not share my faith with my neighbor? Right. That's just the answer is yes. Well, the answer is yes. And so the answer is yes. There was no possibility of me saying no to coming to the marriage thing in October. Right, unless it's booked, unless you can't. Yeah, right, unless I can't. And so I never say, I'll pray about it and let you know. It's not a should I preach somewhere. It's not, well, I'm not going to pray about it. Yeah. I made that decision in 78. And so there are certain things I know I need to do. I won't pray about it and let you know. I'll say yes and then pray about it. Yeah. And so I said yes to the marriage thing. Now, Father, help me, give me things to say and the way to say it that will impact and help people with their marriage and so on. But there are some things that it's a no-brainer. I'm a believer. I should do this. Right. And so at my age, I feel like if the phone rings, the answer is yes. Yeah. If my calendar's clear, and I don't need to mull it over, or maybe talk with my wife whether I'm free or not. But it's sort of a no-brainer obedience thing. Yeah. That I said I crossed that bridge. I said yes. Right. That I would, and so default. So really, the secret is a default to yes, and it's not a should I. It's a
can I or can't I?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then my answer is yes.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
And
well, that's what it's been for me through the years, I guess.
that served you well. I mean,
well, I never have. This is the most I've thought that through.
Yeah.
I guess I've not been asked that before, but
I think that's unusual. I don't
know. Is it? I don't think
it no, it really is. I mean, but that's been something that even in my own life, like I think about back to the preaching, you know, you shared that, you know, in our preaching class, like if I get asked to preach somewhere and my calendar's open,
yes,
I do it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how big or small, or, you know, if I can do it, I'll do it, you know. And that's, at this point in my life, you know, that's been a healthy challenge, that I've said yes to things that, you know, maybe other people in my position wouldn't. And so have you, where, you know, that's too small a thing, or you know, I'm not going to go speak at this thing for, you know, 20 people, that kind of thing. You start measuring, and again, getting too cute with it. And it's like, you know, I speak to a couple thousand people a weekend, you know, I don't need to go speak to 20 people, you know. And you start, and it's like, I think the heart of God is, if I ask you to do something, do it.
Yeah.
You know. And again, I think there's a bigger conversation around this whole idea of default to yes. I think, you know, I try not to say no. I just try to know what I'm saying yes to. And so that helps me filter sometimes, because you can't say yes to everything.
Well, you can't.
No.
Well, maybe especially you can't, though, with your additional responsibilities and the demands and asks that come your way. You do need to be.
I think though but you've been your yes mentality has been such a good guardrail for my heart, that if I don't have a good answer why I can't do something because I've said yes to something else, if I'm saying no because it's, you know, inconvenient or doesn't fit my idea of what's a good use of my time, or like, I think that's getting into dangerous territory, you know, with your heart.
Yeah, I think so.
And, you know, I mean, I just had this conversation last week. I have an assistant, which sounds kind of pretentious, but, you know, she kind of looks after my calendar and that kind of thing. And, you know, I had a few people on the calendar that, you know, generally I wouldn't just be available to meet with, that I meet with. And one of the things we both said in the conversation was, you know, I always need to be accessible at some level, even if it's not to everyone. I need to know that, you know, I think God will always just test me in life, and I think this is for everybody. I think God tests our obedience with things that could be cooked up as distractions. You know, I met with someone last week that there's no reason why it had to be me in the workings of our church. Could have been, like I told you, there's a couple dozen pastors, you know, could have been anybody. But I don't ever want to get to that place where I've built such an island and I'm so isolated and insulated that, you know, it's not, for me, it's not about that person. I think it's a bigger question, is like, does God at the end of the day control my calendar? Does he control my, you know? And I think you put that in me, and I don't want to lose that. Like I need to always, if I answered a call to ministry, I think maybe I'll say it in my words, what I think you're saying is, God called me to ministry. I said yes. Yeah. And that's a big yes.
Yeah, it is. I don't think I ever had to, like the largest church I would have been lead of would be close to 600. And of course there are dynamics that are involved in the demands on your time when you move up to a church the size that King's is today. But I don't, almost always, it never got to be a problem that when I was able to see people that wanted to see me. Yeah. I don't think I ever had to say, no, I can't. You have to see this other staff.
You could have, though. You could have, like, probably. At that size. Like, I think that's the challenge for me is I can say no and justify it. Yes. And that's the thing I think the Lord keeps testing me and I want to guard my heart from is, you know, there is, I could give 100 reasons, you know, why I could say no, but God's after my yes, and I need to know, I need to know that there's that, just like this whole thing, this whole economy of my time and where I give my energy and quote unquote what I say yes to is built on one giant yes. And that needs to be a yes to God and not a yes to Brent. And I think sometimes it's possible, I'll at least say for me and probably other leaders in maybe larger contexts, it's very possible to hide behind the organization and stop saying yes to God and start saying yes to yourself and making excuses for, you know, your availability. And so, you know, it's...
Well, one of the things that helped me say the constant yes, I think I've been diligent through the years about when I'm off, I'm off. When I have diligently through the years taken a day, one day away from ministry, away from the church. I'm not available. 1 day a week, 3 weeks a year.
Yeah.
You know, I would tell my assistant, unless there's the continental divide shifts in Yarmouth, wherever I was, dropped into the depths of the sea, don't call me.
Yeah.
And that helps me that when I'm engaged, I can be
fully
engaged. And I don't think my children, when they were little, I don't think if you were to ask them today, was your dad absent? Do you remember your dad being around? I think they would say that I was a present father.
Yeah.
I was careful not to be out more than 3 nights a week.
Yeah.
When I was off, and not only physically present, but engaged with them, tried to be.
But God's called you to them, and it's another yes.
It's another yes, but you have to. Yeah.
You got to be able to. Yeah. I think it's, I guess at the end of the day, when we start saying yes to ourselves, we're getting in dangerous territory. You know, like I think yes to God, yes to others, beginning with your family, I think.
Yeah.
And that's such a wise framework that I think brings so much life and health. I was just thinking when you were sharing that with your family, you know, you end up having to say no to, you know, so to your assistant, say, don't call me, right? Like I'm going on vacation. So that's a no, but it's based on a bigger yes.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yes. Yeah. Last train of thought. I want to talk to you about the church for a second. You know, you have I was trying to think this, how many churches have you pastored?
Well,
in that nearly 40 years now, right? So almost 4 decades, you've served in 4 different decades anyway. The 80s, the 90s.
Well, the time of my life, actually I started the book, discovered that.
Did you?
You know, it's one thing to write, to preach, and another thing to write for it to be read.
Are you handwriting it?
I am, and I'm here. I've only written a chapter, and it's been a year or two since I've written a chapter. I'm a poor writer, and I read that and I think if I can't do better than that, I can't. It's just a simple
different,
book. The
isn't
time
it?
of my life. It's an episodal book of my time in Yarmouth.
Oh wow!
21 years, the time of my life.
I want to read that. Finish it.
I better get at it.
Hurry up.
But yeah, so 21 years in Yarmouth of the 38, 18 in one.
Yeah,
time.
The vast bulk of it was
the bulk of it there. 4 years at Corbett Avenue in Fredericton, and a year here and a year there.
Well, it's important you say that because you've experienced both longevity and faithfulness in one context, and then you've also served in kind of a lot of interim, you know, like
recent years. I've done some of that. Just wherever it seems like there was a need,
where there was a call.
Yeah.
And you said yes.
And yes. If I got the call, it just seemed like ministry is what I do. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've been Southern Nova Scotia. You've been not just Yarmouth, but you were out at.
I was a year on Cape Island.
Yeah.
A little church down on Cape Sable Island for 1 year. Church of 60 or so.
Yeah.
Blacks Harbor last year.
Yeah.
Back now at my home church for this past year. It looks like
Yeah.
into this next year,
Yeah.
or at least a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've worked in, well, you've worked here with us. You've worked, I think, did a season at Moncton Wesleyan as well. So
3 times on staff there.
yeah. So you've been in churches
I can't
over
hold
1,000.
Can't hold a job.
Yeah. It's just you can't say, you don't know how to say no.
Well, maybe not. My yes maybe gets me in trouble now.
It does. Maybe
trouble.
not. It's good trouble. That's
I
right.
haven't missed it on any of those.
Right.
I look back now and I think that yes was the right one.
Yeah.
That was right that I did that and this and this.
Well, I think that brings up a whole different conversation about, well, I think if we say what we believe to be yes to God from a genuine space, even if we misheard him, which I think is a possibility, but if we're genuine, I'm doing this because I think God's calling me to it, and I want to do the right thing before him, I think he blesses that. Even if, I've said it, like I have a talk I've given at like church leadership conferences talking about stepping out in faith. And one of the things I've said is like, I think God will bless, God-fearing, God-loving stupidity over overly cautious scarcity all day.
Ooh.
I think if
I had a pen, I'd write that down.
well, if like even if like because of the disposition of your heart is yes, I want to please God. I gave him my yes. I'll go. Even if it was like a distraction that it was the devil that did it, I think God gets in there and moves him out. I think he will. I think God gets in there and moves him out and says, "Well, here we are, Cape Sable Island. Let's make this awesome." I think God is a great. Well, here we are. So.
But I've had an experience, at least one, where God clearly, I said the yes and it was wrong.
Yeah.
And God clearly turned me. I just lost my sense of peace and an invading sense. This is not right.
Right.
And the right people calling me at the right time.
Yeah.
Twice I've reversed what was a yes, and rather than, I look back now, it was a stupid move.
Yeah.
But God reversed me. I almost left Yarmouth in 93.
Oh, really?
And right on the cusp of the biggest move that we ever made down there and built this 750-seat sanctuary that you saw last week. Almost left in 93. And I look back now and think, oh, thank you, Lord, for making it clear, letting me know, sending the right people to me. Laurel Buckingham saying, "Don't do this. Don't go. Stay there." H.C. Wilson, two of my other heroes that I do know and know well.
And they're going to be
my best friends. Laurel Buckingham and H.C. Wilson have been models for me. I used to look at them and think, if I want to do what they do. When I was young and watching Moncton and watching Hillside and Dartmouth and so on.
So back to my question about you've worked at churches over 1,000. You've worked at churches of a couple dozen. Down in Sable Island, I would think would be 40 or 50 people probably. You've worked at churches of 200 to 400. You've been at the 400 to 600 range. You've really pretty much done it all. What is it about the church at every size that you find consistent, like that you love? Like what do you? Because I think that's one of the misconceptions people have. If they've not experienced, if they've been at a large church and they've not been part of a small church, they probably make assumptions about it. And small churches often make assumptions about large churches. What do you find beautiful and consistent in all of them?
The Holy Spirit shows up and transforms lives in little churches of 35 and in churches of 2,000. He's just faithful. The word will not return void, will not return empty. It will accomplish its purpose. And the Holy Spirit is present and honors the word preached, and transformed lives happened every place I've ever been.
Right.
And, to lead people into the waters of baptism and hear them declare their faith in Jesus Christ. I mean, even that 1 year in Cape Island, on a good day, we might reach 70. I think we baptized 12 that year.
Wow.
So, remarkable. But that's been consistent every place I've always loved to preach.
Yeah.
And the gospel is the gospel. The word is powerful,
Yeah.
sharper than a
It
double-edged
is.
sword, able
It
to
is.
pierce to the quick.
Yeah.
And no matter where you are, I've seen that in every church size that I've been privileged to be a part of.
Yeah, it's just a refreshing thing to hear, because I think the glorious thing about a church isn't the size of it; it's what God does in it.
Yes.
And I've been to very dead small churches and very alive small churches, and I've been to very dead large churches and very alive large churches. I think it's about what God's doing. You're totally right. Does last question about preaching, because you referenced that you are not just my preaching professor, but one of my favorite preachers of all time. When I picture preaching, I picture you. What makes good preaching in your assumption? What are the quintessential? If I walked away from something and said that was good. What was it that?
Well, it comes out of the preacher's heart.
Yeah.
It's just not a well-crafted. That's good. That's important, but it's got to come from what you are and who you are. You've got to have processed this in your own spirit. You preach it to yourself before you ever preach it to the people.
Right.
But in practical terms, when you hear a sermon that the simple definition of preaching is an expositional sermon is an explanation and an illustration and an application of a biblical truth.
Right.
And nobody does that better than you.
Oh, stop.
Well,
I told Ron he's going to flip this back on me, and I don't want to.
Well, you do. You know, sermons that just explain Scripture and have people going, I believe that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Yeah.
You can't just preach to people's heads.
Right.
You have to get to their heart. What gets to the heart?
Yeah.
Well, when you give them a picture of what that truth looks like in a real life, you tell an illustration about your kids and what Alex said in response to what you said, and all of a sudden people hear it here and feel it here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got to get to the will.
Right.
The application is, how will I respond to this truth? And well, you do those things well. When I teach the preaching course, I taught it, I guess the last time was last year. I want you to come to my class because you do those things consistently with excellence, and you preach with a passion because it comes from the depths of your spirit.
Right.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I knew you'd flip that around on me. That's not why I asked, but there's something about that whole, like I think where Paul says in Ephesians, he says, I didn't fail to preach you the whole counsel. Like I feel like he didn't avoid topics, like, which I think that's always a temptation if you preach the long haul in one place. Is sometimes there's things we'd rather not have to address because it'd be difficult or challenging, but the other thing though is like the whole counsel means not just stirring someone's thoughts or intellect, or not just preaching to the heart. Yeah. Because that if it's all heart, it's emotionalism, and if it's all in your head, it's intellectualism.
Yeah.
And if it's all in your doing, in the will, it's legalism. And that's why I think God wants us like this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Good preaching hits all of those.
It does.
Yeah. And I would encourage, if someone's listening, like that's probably the filter you need to be. I think that's a whole conversation maybe for another day about, we're in a time now where you can sit under the ministry of whatever preacher you want, whenever you want. And there's maybe a consumeristic component to that that's, I think, a really bad thing for the church.
Yeah.
I think there are men and women who have a real huge platform. They're a gift to the kingdom. I'm grateful for those people. But there's something to be said about submitting yourself simply to the pastor that God's put over you. And And then I would probably think about it along those lines of, it's not, is this as good as Stephen Furtick or whoever your favorite, celebrity preacher is? It's, is God challenging me through the pulpit of this church? Is he challenging my thinking? Is he renewing my mind? Is he changing my heart? Is it fleshing itself out in my actions?
Yeah.
I think that's really the framework.
That's what good preaching does.
Yeah, you're right.
At those levels.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for, I think we went beyond 30 minutes. So I think
Awesome.
mission accomplished. So
Awesome.
we need to do this again. This is fun.
I enjoyed it.
Sometime selfishly, maybe I'll get you and Dr. Wilson and Dr. Buckingham.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
And we I just would want to be a fly on the wall and listen to you guys share war stories. So
yeah.
And then it's
love to
such a gift. You're a gift, and I'm just very grateful for you being willing to sit down.
Thank you, Pastor Brent.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it, every bit of it.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Pastor John. He's just such a special, special person to me, and I hope you got to see a little bit of why I think that's the case. Hey, do me a favor before you go. Why don't you subscribe? Why don't you leave a review, at least if it's a positive one? Don't be a troll. Don't bring your trolling here. Take your trolling somewhere else. Leave a review, share it with somebody, help us get the word out and build this platform as we go. We'll see you next time on the Speaking of podcast.